Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this licensing committee on Thursday, the 26th of June at 6 p.m. Could I remind everybody to put the phones on silent in the gallery and on the floor, please? Thank you. Do we have any apologies? Sorry. Thank you. Councillor Sandy.
I've not received any.
Thank you. Do we have any late items? Can you not hear what I'm saying? 1 minute.
Testing. I think you probably just need to speak slightly louder.
Sorry, Jodie.
Yeah.
I'll speak. Is that better? Okay, sorry. Item 3, declarations of interest. Members are invited to declare any interest they have in the business on the agenda, including disclosable pecuniary interests and whether the group whip has been applied in respect of any of the matters under consideration. Any declarations of interest?
Declaration of interest for item 8, Chair.
Thank you. So, item 4, minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of March 2025. Any questions on the minutes, or are we all happy to move?
Chair, I think we just need to confirm that Councillor Repton's interest and whether he's going to be leaving the room and taking part in the discussion.
Okay. Sorry, going back to item 3, Councillor Repton. At what point did you say you were going to... You're going to leave the room after item 7?
I had an interest in item 8, as advised by legal, so that's what I've done, and I will remove myself at that stage.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Repton.
Thank you. Item 5, taxi licensing business review update. Is that Angela? Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. To start off today's business, we would like to introduce a report which outlines the current and proposed business review in relation to the taxi licensing team specific.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take the rest of the update and then hand back to Angie shortly. Right, as we all know, Derby City Council is the licensing authority for the provision of licensed hackney carriages and private hire vehicles, with a duty, insofar as possible, to promote public safety. And as such, we do need to ensure that our policies, practices and procedural requirements are sufficient to both protect the travelling public as well as providing an effective and efficient service to the trade as our customers. There have been a lot of changes in the taxi licensing world over recent years, not least the implementation of the statutory guidance issued by the Department of Transport in 2022 and the subsequent best practice guidance in 2023. We should also be mindful of the push and pull factors which have seen drivers obtaining their badges and licensing their vehicles with other authorities. I'm pleased to say that most of the requirements within the guidance and best practice have been taken on board, with the outstanding matters forming part of this report. There are 3 elements to the review that we're proposing. The first is corporate changes. This is a council initiative to move to a new management system. There should be a smooth transition when transferring to the new system, and customers and users should not be impacted by any change. It's going to be basically the mechanism that we manage all of the licensing applications and processes. The second is procedural changes. This will include an audit to ensure that all the processes we use in the back office to verify and process applications are necessary and appropriate for the application in hand. We are just coming out of the 3-year renewal of driver's licensing period, which is a perfect time to utilise capacity on the review. Part of that review will be to move some requirements onto a digital platform. This will make it easier, particularly for new drivers, to access initiatives such as safeguarding training and the knowledge test. The further benefit will be reduced administration time and costs to the authority, leading to a potential cost reduction in the fees that we charge. This is already part way through its journey and we should be active in the near future. The third element is policies. On this section, it should be noted that it's good practice across any field of licensing that policies are reviewed on a regular basis. Some of our policies have been in place for a while, whilst others are younger. Over the next 3 months, we will be looking at the following: age and emissions policy following the DFT guidance, fitness and proprietary policy, the Derby penalty point scheme, driver vehicle and operator conditions, fees, compliance and enforcement. As a final subject on this list, I would like to add communication and engagement with the trades. If that could be added to the minutes at 4.8, Chair, that would be great. We should note that this is not an exhaustive list, and as we move forward, other options may arise that either delay or change the order and relevance. Derby City Council's licensing policies should ensure safety and compliance without creating disproportionate sanctions. By reviewing current policies and aligning with national best practice, Derby can improve fairness, maintain high standards and foster better relationships with the licensed trade. Should any changes be required to be made to any policy, this firstly will go through this committee, requesting release for consultation purposes and then returning here again following consultation for the final decision. During the consultation period, we will reach out to users, drivers, operators, trade reps, ensuring we capture as wide a range of people as possible. At the end of the period of change, we will look to have one taxi licensing policy for use by everybody involved in the field, irrespective of their capacity.
And following that, Chair, there are 2 recommendations coming out of this report. The first one is to note the contents of the report itself. The second one is to authorise the Strategic Director of Communities and Place to implement a programme for the review of the policies listed at paragraph 4.8 and to report back to the Licensing Committee with proposals for change, if any. On the second recommendation, could we please extend that provision with the words "in conjunction with the Chair of the Licensing Committee" after the Strategic Director's designation, please? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And is there any timeline for that report? It just says report back to the Licensing Committee with any changes.
Yes, Chair, that is part of the recommendation. If accepted, we will work up a timeline and report that back at the next committee meeting. If there is any specific policy that we're able to bring back, we will put that on the forward plan for committee members.
Thank you. And have you got the addition that was mentioned at
Yes,
4.8? Jackie, just checking you've got it. Okay, thank you. So any questions, please? Councillor Hood.
There's 6 different components to this review. Are they going to be reported back to the committee as each one is finished, or is it going to be reported back as a whole? Thank you.
It depends on how each policy is affected. Every time there's a change, it will come back to the committee for release for consultation. That may be a singular item, that may be more than one item. So as I say, it depends on the impact of each policy.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Wilson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to ask really if there was any particular driver for choosing these particular policies or priorities amongst them for review, and are there any others that will need to be considered as part of a review?
Thank you. The Department of Transport statutory guidance and the guidance that was let out by the government recently, a few years ago, They have been the leaders in seeking change. The operational element has been something we've been looking at to bring that onto a digital footing, which again, as has been explained in the report, should help drivers, users and the process in general. If there is anything else that comes out, as we said in the report, you know, those aren't the definitive list. It may be as we're doing something that something else arises, and we will need to look at that as a separate entity, but each time it will come back to this committee.
Any further questions? Okay. So if I can move to the recommendations, 2.1 to note the contents of the report, and 2.2 to authorise the Strategic Director, Communities Place, in conjunction with the Chair, to be added to implement a programme for the review of the policies listed at paragraph 4.8 and to report back to the Licensing Committee with proposals for change, if any.
Do you want to amend that to the next committee?
The proposals to the next committee.
Yeah, that's what you said, wasn't it? Yeah.
The proposals to the next. So we'll
Yeah.
also, yes.
Sorry, Chair, if I can just clarify, we will bring the timeline and proposals to the next committee. If there is any aspects of the policy that we have ready at that point, we will bring that back as well. Appreciate Councillor Hudson's comment. You don't want to be looking at all of these in one committee meeting.
So we can add in the timeline will be included in the next committee. Okay, thank you. Sorry. Is everybody happy with 2.1 and 2.2? Okay, thank you very much. So if we move on to item 6, which is taxi licensing, administration and compliance activities, 24-25. Angela, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This report provides information on the taxi licensing activities undertaken during year 24-25. The information at Appendix 1 sets out the number of requests for service received by the licensing team and the number of licences that we've been processing during the period, as well as the total number of licences in place as of 30th of March 25. Appendix 2 sets out the vehicle compliance work carried out during this period. The purpose of this work is to identify vehicles that appear to fall below the Council standard for licensed vehicles and does not necessarily indicate the general condition of all licensed vehicles. Appendix 3 sets out the knowledge test and safeguarding course statistics for the same period and information on the compliance enforcement related exercises that have been undertaken. Appendix 4 sets down the age breakdown of the vehicle's licence up to the end of March, and the information contained at Appendix 5 sets out a breakdown of the Derby penalty points issued during that period, together with the number of notices that have been issued. Finally, the information contained at Appendix 6 sets out the number of taxi licensing subcommittees held during that period and the number of appeals made against committee and officer decisions, together with the outcome of those appeals. The report is provided for information, Chair, and the recommendation is to note the contents of that report.
Thank you, Angela. Any comments? Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Just one question, really. It's just on Appendix 1 on the private hire drivers renewal. It seems to be significant as what the reason for that. Like last year there was 29, this is 258. Is there a particular reason why it's so different?
Apologies, which number are we looking at? The private hire drivers?
Yes.
Yeah, those are the ones that have gone through over that period. It may be that there has been more received, but they haven't been processed yet. So if something was received, say at the end of March, it may have been, it won't have been dealt with until first or second week in April. So that wouldn't get captured by this list. it will get captured by next year's.
Any further questions?
Thank you, Chair. I notice in the Appendix 2 there's a list of vehicle inspections. On advisory defect, there was 2 vehicles from 2020, and on serious defect suspension was 2020 and 2021. Were these general inspections, or were they brought to the attention of the licensing department?
These will be from officer inspections when they carry out their inspections, whether it's either on their own or whether it's with a police operation. These are the statistics that are caught overall. If you wished for a further breakdown, then I'm sure I could provide that for you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any further questions on that one? We're all happy to note the report. Thank you. So now we're moving on to item 7, which is general licensing, administration and compliance activities. Sorry, Angela, it's you again. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This report provides information on the activities for the general licensing service. And again, it's the year 24-25. It's again been a busy year for the team. The information contained at Appendix 1 sets out the number of requests for service received by the licensing team. So this is everything except for the taxi licensing element. This can include anything from enquiries about how to make an application through to inspection following complaints and any accompanying hearing. Animal welfare licensing appears to be on the increase, not only for new businesses, but for enquiries following information being received from the public. The appendix also gives the number of the various licences, permits and registrations issued during this period, and details of the compliance work and other licensing activities undertaken are also contained there. Again, the report is provided for information, Chair, and the recommendation is to note the content of this report.
Thank you. Turn your microphone off. Sorry. Questions on item 7? Councillor Bolton.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. But under 4.2, can you just expand what the licensing team comprises of, please?
Can I just clarify, is that in relation to team makeup?
Basically, how many staff are in the team?
To cover everything, including taxi licensing, we have 6 members of the team and then myself as service manager.
Any more questions? Councillor Wilson?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to ask if the numbers look fairly consistent, to be honest, from last year, but just to ask if there are any trends that the committee should be made aware of, or any anything out of the ordinary that may have occurred during the year that the committee should be aware of.
Thank you, Councillor. The only trends we're seeing at the moment, which is obviously going to be good for the city, is that we are having, we do at the moment see an increase in the applications for premises licences. So, as I say, that doesn't seem to be causing any issues, and like I say, it can only be good for the city that businesses, and they have been smaller businesses, are breaking into the lifetime of Derby City.
Any further questions on item 7? So we're all happy to note the contents of the report. Thank you. So now we're going to move on to item 8.
Good evening, members. With the Chair's permission, I've been asked to make an address to you at the start of this matter before item 8 gets debated. Thank you, Chair. So members will recall that in the build-up to today's session, 3 days ago, I emailed all committee members. I did so because one of the local trade associations had block emailed the committee, myself, and a number of other council officers. The block email had attached to it extraneous material which the association expressly invited the committee to have regard to in advance of and as part of your deliberations on item 8. That request was improper and unconstitutional. You all know that the council and its committees, of which this committee is one, are constitutional beings. The council's constitution incorporates provisions for managing how committees are called and what information can be put before them for consideration. Only material contained within an agenda that is published in accordance with statutorily prescribed advance information rules can be considered. Today's minutes should therefore reflect that my email to you all was clear in advising that none of the material sent to you by that trade group must be taken into account today. The same message was conveyed to the sender of the email. It then subsequently came to light that the lead petitioner on today's item 8 had similarly block emailed the committee members on at least 2 separate occasions, providing copious amounts of documentation that included some material contained within the printed agenda, but others that were not. I again need to place on record that none of the material contained in any emails, sent by the lead petitioner to members of this committee after the publication of the agenda must be taken into account when you begin to deliberate on the matter. There is one further and arguably more concerning feature of the lead practitioner's email contact with you all. It is that it expressly asked for the, quote, support, unquote, of the committee members to reverse the 5-year rule. I say arguably more concerning because I have been provided with a further email from the lead petitioner, not part of the 2 block emails, which makes a clear reference to some committee members having responded to either or both of the block emails. I should be clear that while inadvisable, the fact a response or responses were sent back is not of itself an issue. What could be an issue is the content of such responses, specifically if they stray beyond a bland acknowledgement into agreeing impliedly or directly, impliedly or actually to support the petition. For the avoidance of doubt, that would amount to predetermination. The Licensing Committee is a regulatory committee of the Council. Its members do not support proposals put before them. They read through the agenda papers, they listen impartially to the representations made to them, they weigh up the arguments for and against the subject of the debate, they deliberate amongst themselves, and then they vote apolitically. Predetermination automatically disentitles any committee member who may have done so, even if only inadvertently, from playing any further part in determining item number 8. I will therefore draw this address to a close by formally inviting any committee member who may have offered support when communicating with the lead practitioner to now withdraw from the chamber. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any comments? Anything to say? Okay, so we will proceed with the papers then. So moving on, is it Andrew again? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The final report for this evening has been initiated following receipt of a petition in relation to the current age and emissions policy which, as you will hear, has been in place over 5 years with an implementation date of January 25. The element in question is the requirement for any new vehicle being licensed as a private hire should be under 5 years of age. This decision does not impact on those vehicles already licensed as they are managed in another area of the policy.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take it forward from there. Context. In 2017, Derbyshire Constabulary made representations regarding concerns about the condition and safety of the private hire and Hackney fleet in the city. The letter identified 3 main concerns: the age of the fleet, the effectiveness of the single annual formal inspection, and the extent of operators' and drivers' professional responsibility. At the licensing committee meeting on the 18th of January 2018, a report was presented setting out the cross-party working group recommendation to authorise consultation with the trade and public, which included proposals, amongst others, to introduce a requirement that new vehicle licences will only be issued to vehicles less than 5 years old at first registration. Consultation on the then draft Taxi and Private Hire Vehicle Strategy 2020 followed, with that provision included amongst the proposals. Respondents were asked whether they agreed, disagreed, had no opinion with the proposal to introduce a requirement that new vehicles would only be issued to vehicles less than a certain age. On August 22nd, 2019, Licensing Committee considered a report containing final proposals on the Taxi and Private Hire Vehicle Strategy 2020, as set out at Appendix 2 of that report, and inviting resolutions upon it. This included 2 age-related elements. The first, only private hire vehicles under 5 years of age from the date of first DVLA registration will be considered for first licensing. The second, private hire vehicles over the age of 10 years from the date of first DVLA registration will ordinarily be refused a licence unless the vehicle is in exceptional condition and has been approved for use following an exceptional condition vehicle check. Appendix 1 of the same report set out the consultation outcome. This included a summary of counter-proposals from the trade that only private hire vehicles that are no older than 10 years old or less from first DVLA registration will be considered for first licensing or as a replacement vehicle, stating this proposal will improve the overall condition of private hire vehicles being licensed for private hire use. Having a lower age of 10 years will also give drivers more options of vehicles available without financial burden of the Council's proposal of vehicles only being licensed less than 5 years on first licence. The Chair confirmed that the members of the Licensing Committee would consider and debate that report in 3 sections: the emissions and age of vehicles, the frequency of inspections, and the colour and branding. In respect of the age of vehicles, the minutes reflect that the entirety of the debate about age focused solely on the terminal age for vehicles beyond which they ordinarily would no longer be licensed. There was no debate from the floor about the 5-year rule. Members of the committee will look to debate those aspects of an agenda that they feel are relevant to them or relevant to those who they represent. Where no debate takes place, effectively where part of a report's narrative is unchallenged, it reflects acceptance by the decision maker of the relevant aspect of a report. Following consideration of the entirety of the report, Licensing Committee resolved to agree the proposed final taxi and private hire vehicle strategy 2020 as set out at Appendix 2, subject to the policy being amended to state from 1st of January 2025 rather than 1st of January 2021 as originally proposed, that all vehicles over the age of 15 years from the date of first DVLA registration will ordinarily be refused a licence unless the vehicle is in an exceptional condition and has been approved for use following an exceptional condition vehicle check. At its subsequent meeting on the 7th of November 2019, the minutes of the meeting held on the 22nd of August 2019 were confirmed as an accurate record. On the 13th of March 2025, the 5-year rule returned to committee, not as a new proposal, but because the licensing team had mistakenly advised some licence holders about the policy's application. The March report proposed moving the implementation date for solely that aspect of the policy from the 1st of January to the 1st of April 2025 to address this miscommunication.
And following that, Chair, there are 2 recommendations set out this evening. The first one is for committee to accept or reject the petition. The second recommendation is subject to recommendation 2.1 to consider appropriate steps to give effect to the resolution made. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Questions from the floor?
When that consultation happened for private hire and Hackney, did you have the percentage of the consultation?
Sorry, in terms of the responses that we received? Yeah, sorry. Yeah, we've got the responses online, but we can also get those sent directly to you.
Councillor Hudson.
Thank you, Chair. Right, when reading various things about this matter, I read that in the future there's actually going to be a structured review into this actual policy somewhere down the pipeline. Is that actually correct?
Yes, Councillor Hudson, reflecting back on item 4, the guidance from the Department of Transport and the other aspects of the policies will all be under review.
So in your work programme, what you've actually got going now, it's already in mind that there is actually a review into this impending, that is correct?
Yes, it will feature as part of that emissions policy that we wish to. It's part of the emissions policy that we wish to propose.
So if we was to accept this petition today, I believe it would come back to a future committee, probably the 11th of September, to discuss an overall policy when there's actually a review featuring that already in existence. Could we end up in that position?
We would tie the two together. So if the decision of committee today is to accept the petition, it is the second recommendation which will kick in today, which is to take steps to give effect to that resolution, which is essentially a review of the policy. So the two things are the same.
What meeting of the licensing committee do you propose we'll kick off that review, what has been mentioned?
It's difficult for me to give an actual date on that because we do need to allocate officer resource and then conduct the review. How long that review takes, I couldn't actually put a timeline on. I couldn't say it's going to take 6 weeks. I couldn't say it'll take 8 weeks. Yeah, but we also have to go out to consultation to finalise as well.
If we was to accept the petition and it came for debate at a future meeting of this committee and it was decided to scrap the 5-year rule without going through a proper process, would that have financial and legal consequences for this council, or would it put it more at risk than if we followed a proper process?
I think, sorry, Councillor Hudson, I have to question what you mean and infer by a proper process. Any review that we undertake will be a proper process because we will be looking at current best practice and guidance regarding age and emissions policies. Certainly the guidance that there was subsequent guidance from the Department for Transport around this very specific issue. So anything we do will be a proper process.
But there's much more risk with basically just pulling the plug at one meeting and reversing the actual policy.
I think in terms of today's decision, if the decision is to accept the petition, it is not a decision to reverse the policy today.
Would initiate a meeting where that could actually happen, which would be riskier than going through the process what you're planning to follow already?
The two would be the same. Yeah, it's not going to be that we come back in the next committee and say, right, we've taken the 5-year policy out. We will need to take steps to give effect to that decision in conjunction with a review of the age and emissions policy itself. So it wouldn't be done as an isolation of we come back in 3 months' time and we take that age element out of the policy without the implications for the wider policy.
Thank you.
Chair, could I just address the legal point as well, please? It's a fair question you asked, Councillor Hudson. Policies come and go by a wide variety of public bodies, and ultimately, when they come and go, they potentially impact one person or the other. It's not, any vulnerability to challenge doesn't necessarily come from reversing or introducing a policy. The vulnerability to challenge comes from the integrity of the decisions behind either introducing a policy, reversing a policy, or tweaking it. And so, I think when you look at what the officer has just said there, the critical point is this. If a decision were made today, and I think it's dealt with in Section 3, if a decision were made today to retain the policy, the debate ends there. If a decision is made today to accept the petition, then there has to be some technical strategic consideration about what the implications of that are, so that the accepting their petition today would mean another paper has to come back that details what the implications of that reversal are, what benefits it gives, what challenges it creates for committee to then take that into account at that stage. But as the officer has said, and I think it's the point you were making as well, if this is on the work programme, I think what you're saying is, should it just be deferred until then? Again, I think that's one for you and your colleagues to debate.
You've basically answered the question. I'd much rather it done structurally rather than forced. Yeah, that's basically.
You fundamentally don't know at this stage what the impact is of, just because you withdraw one paragraph, you need to understand how does it affect those that come before it and those that come after it. You can't just make that decision in a vacuum.
So,
Councillor Khan.
Alu, can you give us some examples? Can you give us examples what if we were to accept this petition and this policy was to be reviewed again, so, and what time scale that this policy is going to have if we were to accept this petition? And can you give us examples what could backfire if on us?
It's a bit like how long is a piece of string, and I don't mean that.
Switch the phones off, please.
I don't mean that disrespectfully. Let me explain why. If, in looking at the impact of that provision, it affects other aspects of service delivery in a significant way, then you will have to go out to consult. You won't just be able to take it out. So the consultation will say, motion, a petition received, motion moved to withdraw that particular provision, and we now have to consult so we can understand how that impacts you, the service users, how that impacts you, the trade, how that impacts you, any other regulators who may be involved. And so, in essence, a decision today to reverse it is only an in-principle decision until all that process has taken place. Consultation, in terms of time limits, as you know, we have a consultation policies, which talks about 90 days. So for a start, we have to build in a 90-day period if the implications are significant. But the 90 days won't just start tomorrow. As the officers have said, they need to go back and work out what does this look like, bring it back to committee. I don't know when the next committee is scheduled for. In real terms, it will be more than 90 days, which clearly means it's going to be more than 3 months. I couldn't say to you with any degree of certainty it will be a month after 90 days or 2 months after 90 days. The process will sort itself out. I think if I get a sense of where you as members are going, the issue here is to ensure that the process is done properly. And I think that's what I suspect that's what you're trying to say. And you just have to give it time to allow that process to work its way through the system.
Councillor Pendy.
Thank you, Chair. And just to confirm this, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the policy was proposed and it got implemented, passed in 2019. It became a policy in 2019. And then during the last committee meeting, or the one before, to correct that the clerical error, the policy was brought back to the chamber. And then the whole issue got embroiled up again and the petition started. And that's why we are here, right? So, and we are also saying that we are also due for another review of the whole policy, which possibly would be taking place in September, and that would take place without the proper consultation and everything. So am I right in saying this, putting it all together, or am I right in saying this? Thank you.
Chair, if I can answer that, I'm trying to think of a polite way of saying no. Whatever we bring back to committee as a proposal would still then have to go out to consultation and then come back to committee for a decision. Yeah.
That will incur the whole debate. I think one of the points that was being made by some of the councillors, that the debate didn't take place at the last meeting, which I've heard in the last meeting. I think, to me, it sounds like a sensible idea that it's being brought back to the whole committee again and a proper discussion takes place on the whole policy. Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, there's a number of concerns I've got about this policy. First one was in terms of how it was taken in 2019, which we discussed at the last meeting. It wouldn't be particularly useful, I don't think, to go over those grounds. What I think we should consider is the policy as it is now and how it's impacting the public, the trade in 2025, because a lot has happened in that intervening time. We've had COVID, we've had Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the spike in fuel prices, inflation, cost of living, all those issues which have impacted on the public and the trade. So it's not unusual. We've just talked earlier on about a number of policies that we're going to review, so it's not particularly unusual for the council to review a policy in the light of events and to consider whether it's still appropriate given changed circumstances. So there is that concern around the cost of providing these vehicles and the consequence of if that were to force drivers out of the trade, because of cost, forcing public into using ride-hailing apps and such which aren't regulated in the same way. The other change which we've seen since 2019 is the increase in registrations outside of the City of Derby. So whilst we bring in a policy, it's perfectly possible and legal for drivers to just go to a different authority with laxer rules and a different regime. Absolutely legal and under the current law for any member of the trade to do that. But what that means is that then we have no enforcement whatsoever over those vehicles, and a measure which is seeking to improve the safety of the public could actually have the opposite effect. So, as I say, I've got those concerns. I raised them last time, but tonight isn't about debating the rights or wrongs of the policy. It's about discussing the petition and accepting and deciding whether we as a committee think it would be appropriate for us to take another look at it. And I certainly do. And as comments and questions from other councillors have made clear, that's got to be done through a legal and a proper process. So my thoughts would be to request a paper back to this committee in future with a number of options, maybe 4 options, keeping the policy as it is. The other extreme of that is having no age rule at all, or compromises in between. So looking at those, as a committee, we need to have that information, an options appraisal, looking at it more in detail, looking at what the implications would be so that we can take stock again, look at this decision as where we are in 2025 and how it's impacting in the real world today, and to be able to make a decision with full facts in front of us. I know the officers would be able to do a sterling job of bringing that information together, looking at what other local authorities do and comparing ourselves, benchmarking ourselves to other similar local authorities, and basically looking at the question in light of those changes, the cost of living, difficulties that have hit everybody, and the changes in the licensing regime and other the ability of drivers to go elsewhere, and how that impacts on the safety of the public of Derby ultimately, and the ability of us to be able to deliver a fleet of private hire vehicles that's available for people when they need it.
Any other speakers? Sorry, Councillor Bolton, I think you were first.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've listened very carefully to the questions and read the reports, etc. And can I make it clear, I wasn't on the committee back in 2019 when this decision was taken. So I've come with fresh eyes here this evening. I support what Councillor Rawson has outlined, and that we bring the policy review forward to take into account the concerns that we have got before us from the licence vehicle holders. I obviously bear in mind the cost of living crisis, and that includes obviously the price of petrol and insurance during that time, and also the COVID pandemic that we all experienced 5 or 6 years ago. One thing that I think we ought to lobby Parliament about is the fact that even today, whilst driving to this building, there was a taxi in front of me from Wolverhampton and indeed on another lane from Ashfield. I think Councillor Rawson is right, and it's not something that we can do as a council. It needs to be a Parliament issue. We need to write to our local MPs and inform them of this issue to see if we can get a change of law regarding other taxis from other cities coming into our city, because clearly that is just taking trade from our taxi licence holders. We need to act professionally. We need to abide by the due process. We obviously need to abide by the statutory consultation. We need to do it in a proper way. But I think we need to do this as quickly as possible, because if the trade are concerned about their livelihood, clearly that has a knock-on effect to their whole living conditions. We ought to act immediately as a caring authority and take on board what we have before us this evening and act sensibly, in my view. And I think we should recommend that this review takes place as soon as possible. And I bear in mind, obviously, there is a resource issue within the department, but I think every council department has a resource issue. We have to prioritise what work we do, and I think this should take priority. But especially, we need to consult our local members of parliament regarding the crossover of trade from one city to another. That is something that we need to do something about. Thank you.
Yeah, I think my two colleagues, Martin Rosen and Sarah Bolton, have touched on certain points I was going to pick up. And I think, you know, the drivers, outside drivers, where they're driving in our city, where we are saying public safety and the trade and the taxis, that we have no control over. We can't enforce anything. So I think that's also to be looked at when we mention about public safety, where we can't control anything over these taxis, and we are more forcing and enforcing on our city drivers, and they're moving out of town, and they're coming back to a city with a different badge, different town's badge. So I think this policy needs to be looked at, reviewed, and given a time scale, and how soon.
Councillor Rawson, can I just confirm then, are you putting that forward as a motion, as an amendment? Okay, and so just to clarify then, so you were going to request an options paper to come back to committee with 4 options. So the 4 options, leave as it is, no age limit, and can you remind me of the other 2, please?
Well, it'd be effectively a compromise situation in terms of the age limit, 8 years or whatever it might be. Or if there's another clever idea that officers in taxi licensing might have a wild card, you might say, that's outside of that.
I had Councillor Rawson, if it helps, I had the 4 noted as leave it as it is, no age limit at all, a compromise somewhere in between, and as quickly as possible. Those were the 4 things I noted, you said.
Yeah, thank you, Ollie.
I think we can add that to what Councillor Rawson has outlined. I think we ought to write to our city MPs and inform them of the issue we've got regarding the crossover of city plate. But I'll accept proper other wording if you wish.
No, that's perfectly acceptable. And in terms of the protocol and the governance, that means the letter will go from the chair, as the chair of licensing, to the MPs.
So we should be discussing the amendment now.
No. Are you going to speak on this amendment?
Sorry, I can't hear.
Sorry, we're now not speaking on the original recommendation. We're now speaking on the amendment that Councillor Rawson's put forward. Okay, so I just need to make that clear. So, Councillor Pandy.
I like the suggestion from Councillor Bolton. I would also like to add on, because I've been doing some research, and it seems like Nottingham City Council only allows 4-year-old vehicle to be licensed. Luton only does 5 years. But at the same time, Manchester and Birmingham, they can allow up to 10 years old vehicle. So while we are writing to the MPs and Member of the Parliament, could we also include to provide some consistency from the Parliament on this issue, so we don't have to come to this chamber to maybe, to have it, because this is one of the issues. You can get it from Wolverhampton on an older vehicle, but in Derby or Nottingham, you won't be able to do that. So while we are writing to the Member of Parliament, I would request to this thing to be added to the request. Thank you. Please, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, that's noted. Councillor.
Is this a separate recommendation? Looks like it's a separate recommendation. I think Councillor Pandy's just raised. I think first we're debating Councillor Martin Rawson's motion.
I think it'd be okay.
Right. I think Councillor Pandy was just suggesting that was added to Councillor Bolton's letter, not as a separate entity. Is that, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, is that right?
That's what I've got it as.
So,
are you okay with that?
Councillor Rawson's proposal then, we will take a vote on his proposal. So all those, you want to ask a question? Okay.
What's in this motion that Councillor Rawson has proposed? Is it broadly in line with what you're planning to do later, those 4 points? Will they actually feature in that? In effect, is it the same thing?
It is, and what this effectively does is, in terms of the item 4, it gives the first action for that work programme to prioritise this. So
it's basically set that in motion by this motion going through if it does. Thank you.
Councillor Lakin, is your question about this?
More a point of common sense, really. If we're intending to do away with out-of-town taxis, and I want to take a taxi from Derby to Nottingham, would I have to transfer to a Nottingham taxi halfway up the A52?
I think that's why the issue is in place. That is entirely the issue. It's the issue of if a driver from Derby goes to Nottingham, do they have a right to pick another fare up from Nottingham to bring them back to Derby, or are they making a one trip? And this is where this anomaly has occurred. 100%. Okay. So, any further comments, or I'm now moving to...
We're going to deal with the motion first, and then get to that. But we've got a second.
Chair, before we vote, can I just ask somebody to read the motion back again to us so that we can all be sure what we're voting on? Yeah, can you just read it back to us so we're sure what we're voting on?
Right, okay. If Jodie's going to read it out because she's got it all written down, and then we'll take a vote.
So it's to request an options paper back to Now, do we want to set a timeline? Obviously, you've said as quick as possible. Are we going to say to the next committee? With the options of leaving the age policy as it is, no age rule or compromise of the age. And then we're also going to write to the MPs really crossover of taxes across. I'll find some better wording than that for you. And we're going to include in that consistency of age limit. Have I covered everything that you wanted me to cover?
Just a thought, are we, with saying bring it back to the next committee, how is that officer time-wise? Because we don't want to be asking for something that's completely impossible.
I think considering in some ways the urgency of reviewing this and that we would have to go out to consultation 12 weeks to the next meeting, I think we can bring a draft outline proposal to the next committee.
Bob, can I clarify? That's a draft of the options paper.
Is that acceptable? That for saying a draft of the proposal,
the options,
the option proposal.
Yeah.
So are we all clear on what we're taking the vote on now? So all those in favour?
1, 2, 3. That's carried.
Okay, so the motion's carried.
So what we need to do then?
Okay. So
2.3.
going back to the recommendations, we're going back to 2.1, which is to accept or reject the petition. So the petition is rejected on the grounds then of 2.2 that we insert the motion
that we've just agreed.
That we've just agreed.
Yeah. And then 2.3 is Councillor Bolton's.
And 2.3 will be Councillor Bolton's recommendation. Or do we have to vote on that as well?
No, because we've voted on that now.
Okay. We got there in the end. Are we all happy? We all agree? Lovely. Thank you very much, everybody. I think that concludes this meeting. Thank you.